Elliot had always loved exploring new planets. As a member of the Federation's exploration team, it was his job to map out distant worlds and assess their potential for human colonization. But today, on the misty surface of the alien planet Velera, something unusual was about to happen. The thick jungle stretched endlessly in every direction. Giant trees, their branches like massive arms reaching toward the sky, provided shade from the warm, golden sun. The sounds of strange creatures echoed all around, but Elliot had learned to tune them out, focusing only on his mission. The day had started like any other, walking through the jungle, scanning the environment with his handheld device, marking points of interest on his map. But then, as he moved deeper into the forest, something caught his eye. A figure, barely visible among the thick ferns and vines, appeared motionless on the ground. Curious and cautious, Elliot approached. He was expecting to find an injured animal, perhaps one of the large four-legged creatures that roamed the area. Instead, he found something far more startling. A woman. She lay sprawled on the ground, her delicate wings crumpled beneath her, and her body bruised and bloodied. At first, Elliot thought he had stumbled upon a member of a native species, though he'd never seen anyone like her before. Her skin was a soft shade of pale blue, almost translucent, and her hair shimmered in shades of silver. Her wings were unlike anything Elliot had ever seen, broad and elegant, with patterns that reminded him of delicate flowers. But one of them was broken, bent at an odd angle, its once perfect structure shattered and useless. Elliot's heart raced as he crouched down beside her. He wasn't sure what to do. His training had never prepared him for something like this. He could tell that she was alive. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, but she was clearly in pain. For a moment, he debated whether he should leave her. The jungle was dangerous, and it was clear she wasn't from around here. But something inside him, a sense of responsibility, or maybe just the sheer helplessness he felt seeing her in such a state, made him stay. He couldn't just walk away. "Hey," he said softly, hoping his voice would reach her. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, their gazes met. Her eyes were a striking shade of silver, almost like mirrors, reflecting the world around them. There was confusion and pain in her expression, but also a hint of recognition. You're human," she whispered weakly. Elliot nodded, his throat dry. "Yes, I'm here to help you." She tried to speak again, but her voice faltered. Her wings twitched as she shifted, but the effort caused a pained gasp to escape her lips. Elliot could see the tears forming in her eyes, but she didn't cry. Instead, she gritted her teeth in silence, trying to keep her composure. "Don't worry," Elliot said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "I'll get you help." He quickly assessed her injuries. Her wing was broken in several places, and there were gashes along her arms and legs, likely from the rough landing. It didn't look like any animal had done this. She had fallen, probably from a great height, and the impact had left her near death. But the thing that struck Elliot most was the calmness with which she accepted her fate. Despite the obvious pain, she didn't beg for help. She simply stared at him, waiting for him to decide what to do next. "I can help you," Elliot said again, more firmly this time. "But I'll need you to trust me." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded, though her body seemed to stiffen slightly as she shifted her weight. "I trust you," she whispered. Elliot's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected that response. Most people, if they were in pain or fear, would struggle or panic. But this alien woman, with wings that seemed so fragile yet beautiful, was simply waiting, trusting him to do the right thing. Without wasting any more time, Elliot took out his medical kit. He had a portable device that could help stabilize bones and tissue, and he hoped it would be enough to help her broken wing. He wasn't sure if it would work on an alien anatomy, but he had no other choice. As he worked to stabilize her injuries, Elliot asked the most basic question, hoping to understand more about her. "What's your name?" Her voice was barely audible. "Nathira," she replied. "Nathira," he repeated softly, trying to remember the name. "I'm Elliot." She gave him a faint nod, then winced as he carefully adjusted her wing. Elliot could tell she was fighting to stay awake, her breaths shallow and ragged. Once her wing was temporarily stabilized, he decided it was best to get her somewhere safer, somewhere they could figure out what to do next. There was no way he could carry her back to his ship on foot, and he wasn't sure if she could walk yet, but the longer they stayed in the jungle, the more danger they were in. "I'm going to take you to my ship," he told her, moving her gently. "We'll get you fixed up there." Nathira didn't respond, but her eyes softened, and Elliot could feel the weight of her trust. As he carefully lifted her and began to make his way back through the jungle, the strange bond between them started to form. One that neither of them could have predicted, but one that would change both of their lives forever. Elliot moved carefully through the dense forest, carrying Nathira in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, but her injuries made every step a delicate challenge. Her wing, though stabilized, still caused her great pain, and her breathing remained shallow, as if the weight of the world was on her slender frame. The path back to the small outpost where his ship was parked seemed endless, but Elliot was determined to get her there. The tall trees and thick underbrush made it hard to see, but he knew the way. His ship was just a few hours away, too far to travel without rest, but not too far to keep pushing. As he walked, he couldn't help but wonder about her. Nathira. The name sounded foreign, yet something in the way she had looked at him with such trust stirred something deep inside him. How had she ended up here, injured and alone? Was she part of a larger group? And why had she chosen to trust him, a complete stranger, so easily? Despite the curiosity bubbling inside him, Elliot kept his thoughts focused on the task at hand. He had to get Nathira to safety, and he couldn't afford to let his mind wander too much. By the time they reached his ship, the sun was beginning to set, casting a soft, golden light over the alien landscape. The ship, a small but efficient model designed for exploration, stood out against the backdrop of towering trees. Elliot hurried inside, where he laid Nathira down on the bed in the medical bay. The ship's lights flickered on automatically, casting a warm, calming glow. The medical bay was equipped with everything Elliot might need, but as he looked over the alien woman, he realized that he wasn't prepared for something like this. He had been trained to treat injuries on humans, not on beings like her. Her skin, so delicate and translucent, made the wounds on her body look even more serious than they already were. The broken wing, with its intricate pattern, was a puzzle he wasn't sure he could solve. "I'll fix you," Elliot muttered to himself, more to reassure himself than to speak to her. Nathira remained silent as he worked, her eyes closed but her breathing steady. The pain seemed to have subsided for now, but Elliot knew it wouldn't last forever. He activated the medical scanner, which buzzed softly as it ran its diagnostic scan. The results flashed across the screen, giving him information about her injuries. The wing was broken in several places, but there was also damage to her back, as though the fall had caused severe bruising. Her arms and legs were scraped, but they didn't appear to be life-threatening. "Just a little more," Elliot said quietly as he prepared a healing gel. He applied it to her skin, watching as the substance began to work. It was designed to promote rapid healing, but there was only so much it could do. He knew he would have to perform more delicate work on her wing to ensure it healed properly. As he worked, Elliot's thoughts drifted again, this time to Nathira herself. She had never asked for help. When he found her, she hadn't begged or pleaded. She had simply accepted the fact that she was injured, and it seemed had accepted him too. He couldn't understand why someone so injured, so vulnerable, would put their trust in him. Most people would have fought, resisted, or been terrified. But she was different. She had looked at him as if he were the only person who could help her, and there was something deeply humbling about that. He finished applying the gel and moved on to her wing. Slowly and carefully, he he began to adjust the bones and joints, using the medical tools available to him. It was delicate work, and as he worked, Nathira stirred slightly. Elliot paused, unsure if he had caused her any discomfort. But she didn't open her eyes. She simply lay still, as if trusting him to finish what he had started. "You're going to be okay," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to her or to himself. "I won't leave you." Nathira's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time, she looked directly at him with those striking silver eyes. There was something unreadable in her gaze, something that made Elliot pause for a moment. "I know," she whispered, her voice faint but steady. "You don't have to stay. I can heal on my own." Elliot shook his head, not wanting to hear that. "I'm not going anywhere." There was a silence between them for a moment, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems. Elliot's fingers gently adjusted the last piece of her wing, making sure it was aligned correctly. Nathira didn't flinch or make a sound, though he could see the tension in her muscles as she fought against the pain. "There," Elliot said, stepping back to admire his work. "That should hold for now. The healing gel will take a few hours to fully activate. You need to rest." Nathira seemed to nod, though it was clear that her energy was almost spent. She closed her eyes again, letting the exhaustion overtake her. Elliot stood there for a few moments, watching her carefully. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Her alien beauty was striking, yes, but it was more than that. It was the strength she exuded even in her weakened state that drew him in. She had the grace of someone who had seen great things and endured hardships. But her eyes, those silver eyes, held a deep sadness that Elliot couldn't fully understand. As she slept, Elliot moved quietly around the ship, cleaning up the medical bay and running diagnostics on the ship's systems. He tried to focus on the tasks at hand, but his thoughts kept returning to Nathira. She had trusted him when she had no reason to, and now he had to protect that trust. He didn't know where this path would lead, but something told him that he couldn't leave her side, not now. When he finally sat down beside her, he couldn't help but wonder what had brought her to this planet. Was she a survivor of some greater battle? Or was she just a wanderer, lost and alone like so many others in the universe? Whatever the answer was, Elliot knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let her face whatever came next alone. The next few days aboard the ship passed in a blur. Nathira was still recovering, but the healing gel had worked wonders. Her wounds were slowly closing, and the pain that had once clouded her eyes was now only a faint memory. Elliot was relieved to see her getting stronger. He checked on her regularly, making sure the technology he used was doing its job. She rested most of the time, sleeping deeply, though there were moments when her eyes would flutter open. Whenever that happened, she would look at him with a quiet gratitude, as if she knew he was the reason she was still alive. Elliot wasn't sure why he felt so connected to her. He had helped many people on his travels, but none had left an impression on him like Nathira. It was more than just the fact that she was alien. It was the way she trusted him despite the unknowns, the way she carried herself with a quiet strength even when vulnerable. It was as if she knew the cost of survival better than anyone else. But Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Though the ship's systems were running perfectly, and Nathira was recovering, the peacefulness he had come to rely on was interrupted by the occasional sounds of distant thunder and crashing waves from outside the ship. The storm had come quickly, and it didn't seem to be letting up. On the fourth night of their time together, as Elliot sat in the cockpit, monitoring the weather, a warning alarm sounded. His heart skipped. The ship's sensors were detecting something big, something massive moving through the jungle. Elliot quickly rushed to the medical bay where Nathira had been resting. He found her sitting up, her wings slightly raised as she stared out the small window. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice still weak but steady. Elliot didn't want to alarm her, but the look on his face said everything. "There's something moving out there. It's huge, and it's getting closer." Nathira's eyes narrowed. She could sense it too, the low rumble of footsteps in the distance. It wasn't natural. The creatures of this planet, though large, moved in a rhythmic, predictable pattern. This was something different, something more dangerous. "You need to stay here," Elliot said firmly, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'll go check it out." But before he could move, Nathira's expression shifted. There was a fire in her eyes, a spark that told him she wasn't going to stay behind, no matter what he said. "I'm not helpless," she said quietly, but with a determination that made Elliot stop in his tracks. Her wings, though still fragile, had healed enough that they fluttered with strength. "Ha!" She moved slowly, testing her muscles, and then stood up. "I will fight if I must." Elliot could feel his heart race at the thought of putting her back in harm's way, but there was something in her gaze that told him this was not just about her strength. It was about pride, about not being seen as weak. He didn't argue. "All right," he said. "Let's go then." The two of them exited the ship, the rain now falling heavily as they made their way out onto the slippery ground. The air was thick with mist, and the jungle around them seemed to close in. The massive, looming trees appeared even more menacing in the storm's shadows. Every step they took felt like it was leading them into the heart of danger. They didn't have to go far. The sound of crashing branches and the heavy thud of footsteps grew louder, closer. Elliot's hand instinctively went to the blaster at his side, but Nathira stopped him. "I don't need weapons," she said softly, though there was no fear in her voice. Elliot didn't understand, but he didn't argue. Instead, he kept his eyes on the trees ahead, scanning the area for any signs of movement. Suddenly, the beast appeared. It was enormous, a hulking creature covered in dark, damp fur with massive, clawed feet that left deep imprints in the ground. Its eyes glowed a bright red, and it let out a deafening roar that echoed through the jungle. Elliot's heart pounded in his chest as he raised his blaster, preparing to defend himself and Nathira. But before he could take aim, Nathira stepped forward. The creature paused as if sensing her presence, its glowing eyes fixed on her. It growled low in its throat, sniffing the air. Then, in a move that surprised Elliot, Nathira spread her wings wide, their delicate edges shimmering in the dim light. She stood tall, her posture regal, and for a moment, it was as if the entire jungle had fallen silent. She seemed to be speaking to the creature without words, her voice low and melodic, as she called out in a language Elliot couldn't understand. The creature responded with a growl, but there was no aggression in it, just a strange recognition. It stepped forward slowly, then stopped, tilting its head as if studying Nathira. Elliot stood frozen, his blaster lowered, unsure of what was happening. The two were locked in some silent communication, and though Elliot had no idea how, he could sense that the beast was no longer a threat. Finally, Nathira lowered her wings and took a step back. The creature, as if understanding, turned and disappeared into the jungle, leaving only the sound of rain in its wake. For a long moment, neither Elliot nor Nathira spoke. He watched her closely, still processing what had just happened. She had spoken to the creature, calmed it with nothing but her presence. There was more to Nathira than he had realized. "That was amazing," Elliot said, his voice filled with awe. Nathira turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I told you, I am not helpless," she said quietly. As they made their way back to the ship, Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that their bond was deepening. It wasn't just about helping her anymore. It was about something more, something neither of them had anticipated. The storm raged on, but they had survived, and in that moment, Elliot realized that he would do anything to protect her. They were no longer just two strangers from different worlds. They were something more. The dangers of this alien planet had only just begun, but together, they would face them. And Elliot had a feeling that their connection was only going to grow stronger from here. The following days aboard the ship were filled with a sense of cautious optimism. Nathira was recovering faster than Elliot had anticipated. Her injuries were nearly healed, and though she still moved a bit slowly, her wings were no longer as fragile as they had been. The healing gel had worked wonders. but the real progress came from her own resilience. As Nathira continued to regain strength, the two of them spent more time together. Iliad had expected to feel uneasy around an alien, someone so different from him, but there was something about Nathira that made him feel at ease. She wasn't like the stories he'd heard about fierce alien warriors or distant, unapproachable beings. Nathira was quiet, thoughtful, and often more interested in what he had to say than in talking about herself. In the moments when they would share a quiet meal or sit together, the silence felt comfortable. Nathira would listen intently as Iliad told her stories about Earth, about his life back home, and about the many places he had seen throughout the galaxy. It was strange to him that he had never imagined finding a companion like this during his missions, someone who understood the quiet loneliness of exploration, but also shared a mutual curiosity about the unknown. One evening, as the ship drifted through the stars, Iliad found himself looking over at Nathira, who was resting by the window. Her wings, though still delicate, now stretched comfortably as she leaned back, looking at the stars outside. Iliad approached cautiously, not wanting to disturb her, but she noticed him immediately. Her silver eyes flickered over to him, and for the first time in a while, she gave him a smile, small but real. "Everything all right?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "Yes," Nathira replied, her voice soft. "It is beautiful here." Iliad nodded, gazing out the window with her. The stars stretched endlessly before them, each one a tiny point of light in the vastness of space. It felt peaceful here, far away from the dangers of the jungle or the uncertainty of the world they had left behind. It was just the two of them now, and for the first time in a long while, Iliad felt like he could finally relax. "I'm glad you're feeling better," Iliad said, breaking the silence. Nathira nodded, though her expression seemed to shift into something more serious. "I've never been injured like that before," she said quietly. "I was afraid I wouldn't heal in time." Iliad's brow furrowed. "You're stronger than you realize." Nathira didn't respond at first, but after a long pause, she finally spoke again. "My people," she hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. "We don't show weakness. It is a belief ingrained in us from childhood. We are taught to be strong, to endure, and never to ask for help." Iliad couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. He had always admired strength, but hearing her speak about the weight of that expectation made him realize how much it must have cost her, both physically and emotionally. "You don't have to be strong all the time, you know," Iliad said gently. "You don't have to carry that burden alone." Nathira's gaze softened as she looked at him, her silver eyes searching his face for something, as if trying to understand what he meant. "And yet, I've always had to carry it," she replied. "Being vulnerable is seen as a weakness, but with you," she faltered again, her voice quieter this time, "I don't feel weak." Iliad felt something stir in his chest as she spoke, an emotion he hadn't expected. It was more than just admiration or respect. It was something deeper, something that tied them together in a way he couldn't explain. He didn't know how or why, but the bond between them had grown stronger, even without either of them acknowledging it aloud. Before Iliad could respond, a low hum filled the ship's cabin. The lights flickered briefly, and the steady rhythm of the engines seemed to pause. "What's happening?" Nathira asked, a slight edge to her voice as she sat up straighter. Iliad quickly checked the ship's controls. "We're entering an asteroid field," he said, his voice calm but alert. "I need to get to the controls. Stay here, okay?" Nathira didn't argue. She simply nodded, her wings twitching slightly as she leaned against the window. Iliad rushed to the cockpit, but as he sat down, a feeling of unease washed over him. He had expected the ship to handle well in space, but the asteroid field was dense, and there was no way to avoid the debris at high speed. As he navigated through the rocks, Iliad noticed something strange on his sensors, a small signal, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't from the asteroid field. It was coming from a nearby moon. Nathira had entered the cockpit by this point, standing beside him, as she looked at the flashing signals on the screen. "What's that?" she asked, her tone tense. "I don't know," Elliot said. "But it's coming from that moon up ahead." There was a brief pause before Nathira spoke again. "It's too dangerous. We shouldn't go there." Elliot glanced over at her, unsure. He had already made up his mind. "I'll check it out. It's just a signal. Maybe there's something important there." "I understand," she replied softly. "But if something happens, you'll be alone." The weight of her words struck Elliot harder than he expected. He had been so focused on the mission, so eager to explore the unknown, that he hadn't really thought about the risks. It wasn't just about him anymore. He was responsible for her too. After a long moment, he made a decision. "We'll go together. You're part of this now too." Nathira looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then, with a slow nod, she finally said, "Then let's go." Elliot adjusted the ship's course, steering it toward the moon. As the stars and the asteroid field grew distant behind them, a sense of anticipation filled the air. They were about to discover something new, something unknown, and whatever it was, they would face it together. For the first time since he had met Nathira, Elliot realized just how much their bond had changed him. He was no longer just an explorer out on his own. He was now part of something bigger, something unexpected. And whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't facing it alone. The moon ahead grew larger as Elliot steered the ship toward it, his eyes fixed on the screen. The signal was stronger now, a consistent pulse that seemed to come from the surface itself. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important was waiting for them there. Behind him, Nathira sat quietly, watching the moon grow closer, her eyes sharp and observant. Elliot couldn't help but notice the way she held herself. Despite the delicate state of her wings, she exuded a quiet strength that fascinated him. She wasn't just another passenger on this journey. She was an equal, someone who had become part of the mission, part of his life. He didn't understand what had drawn them together so quickly. It had only been a few days since he found her in the jungle, broken and vulnerable. Now it felt like they had already shared something deeper than either of them could explain. "Are you sure about this?" Nathira's voice broke through his thoughts. Elliot glanced over at her, a little surprised by the question. "I have to check it out. We both know that." She nodded but didn't speak further. It was clear that she had her doubts, though she had already agreed to go with him. Elliot appreciated that. She hadn't hesitated to stand by him, even though she wasn't fully certain about what lay ahead. The ship gently touched down on the moon's surface, the metal hull vibrating slightly as it settled. The atmosphere was thin here, and the ground was rocky, almost barren, except for the occasional strange formation in the distance. Elliot opened the hatch and stepped out, feeling the cold air on his face as Nathira followed him closely. The surface was quiet, too quiet. "Stay alert," Elliot murmured as they both moved forward, carefully stepping around jagged rocks and low hills. The signal had been coming from this area, but now that they were here, it was harder to pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. Nathira's wings fluttered lightly as she adjusted to the low gravity. Despite her earlier concerns, she moved with a grace that made her seem weightless, her movements deliberate and precise. Elliot couldn't help but admire her, though he quickly focused on the task at hand. They walked in silence, the only sound being their footsteps and the faint hum of their equipment. The air was cold, but not unbearable. As they approached a cluster of strange, towering structures, the signal grew stronger again. This time, it was almost deafening, a constant, rhythmic pulse that seemed to be calling to them. "This is it," Elliot said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever's causing this signal, it's here." Nathira's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the strange ruins ahead of them. The buildings were tall, and their walls were covered with unfamiliar symbols and markings. The structures looked ancient, like they had been abandoned for centuries. Elliot stepped closer, his curiosity driving him forward. As he approached one of the towering pillars, he felt a strange pull, almost like an invisible force guiding him. He extended his hand, touching the smooth surface of the structure. The moment his fingers brushed against it, the ground trembled. Nathira quickly stepped back, her wings flickering in alarm. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "I didn't do anything," Iliad replied, taking a cautious step back. The vibrations seemed to stop as quickly as they had started, leaving the air thick with tension. Before either of them could speak, a low, resonating sound filled the air. The signal was now so powerful that it seemed to vibrate through their very bones. And then, from the depths of the structure, a shape began to emerge. It wasn't a creature, but something far more surprising. A large metallic door slowly slid open, revealing a dark, hollow interior. The signal was coming from within. Iliad stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. "Should we go in?" he asked, looking to Nathira for guidance. She hesitated. I don't know," she admitted, "but we have no choice. We've come this far." Iliad nodded. They had no way of knowing what was inside, but they had to go. Slowly, they stepped forward, the door sliding shut behind them as they entered the darkened chamber. The inside of the structure was vast, much larger than they had expected. There were strange, glowing panels along the walls, casting an eerie light that flickered like a dying flame. The air smelled of dust, ancient and forgotten. At the far end of the room, there was another device, one much larger than anything Iliad had ever seen. It pulsed with energy, its surface shimmering with lights and strange patterns. It looked like some kind of power core, but Iliad couldn't make sense of its design. Nathira stepped closer, her eyes focused on the strange object. "What is this?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. "I don't know," Iliad admitted, but his curiosity pushed him closer. The signal was definitely coming from the device, but I think it's the reason we're here. As he approached the object, a soft hum filled the room, and the patterns on the surface began to shift. The air around them seemed to grow heavier, and Iliad could feel a sense of power building in the space. For a moment, he felt like they were on the edge of something monumental, something that could change everything. But as his hand reached out toward the device, he froze. A voice echoed in the chamber, a voice that was unmistakably alien. "You should not have come here." Both Iliad and Nathira turned sharply toward the source of the voice. There, in the shadows of the room, a figure emerged, shrouded in darkness. It was a tall figure, humanoid but with features that were too sharp, too angular to belong to any species Iliad had seen before. The voice had come from this being, but there was no sign of its mouth moving. "We have been waiting for you," the voice continued, a sense of both warning and invitation in its tone. Iliad's heart raced. Whatever was going on, this was far beyond anything he had anticipated. They weren't alone. And now, they were about to learn just how dangerous this journey had become. Iliad's heart raced as the voice echoed through the chamber. It was not like anything he had ever heard before, deep, powerful, and filled with an undeniable authority. The figure that stepped from the shadows was tall, its silhouette sharp and imposing. The air felt heavy around them, thick with the strange energy that pulsed from the mysterious device at the center of the room. Nathira stood beside Iliad, her wings slightly raised, ready for whatever might come next. The look in her eyes was one of cautious determination, but there was something else too, uncertainty. She didn't know who or what this being was, and neither did Iliad. The figure moved forward, its movements graceful yet deliberate, like it was used to being in control. It stopped just a few meters away from them, its glowing eyes scanning them both. "You have awakened something ancient," the voice said again, though this time the words seemed to carry a weight, a warning that made Iliad feel as if the room itself was pressing in on him. Iliad took a cautious step forward. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tension building in the air. "What is this place?" The figure tilted its head, as if considering the question before responding. I am a guardian, it said simply. This is a place of power. A place meant to be forgotten. Abandoned. Nathira stepped closer to Eliot, her wings fluttering slightly. Guardian, she asked, her voice full of skepticism. What kind of guardian keeps secrets like this? The figure did not respond immediately, but instead, it raised a hand, and the room seemed to shift. A soft light from the panels along the walls flickered, casting eerie shadows across the floor. The energy from the device grew stronger, vibrating with a pulsing rhythm. You should not have come here, the Guardian repeated, this time with a hint of finality in its tone. This place is not meant for your kind. Eliot felt a chill run down his spine. The Guardian's words were unsettling, but what worried him more was the way it spoke about their kind, humanity, as if they didn't belong here, as if they were intruders. We didn't know, Eliot said quickly. We came here following a signal. We didn't mean to disturb anything. The figure's glowing eyes focused on him, its expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, it spoke again. The signal was meant for you. It has been waiting. You are the ones who will decide the fate of this place. Eliot's mind raced. He had no idea what the Guardian meant. What did it mean, the fate of this place? And why had the signal been sent to them, of all people? They were just explorers, just two travelers who happened to stumble upon something far bigger than they could have imagined. I don't understand, Eliot admitted, his voice softer now. What do you want us to do? The figure seemed to consider his question, its glowing eyes narrowing slightly. Then, slowly, it stepped aside, revealing the massive device in the center of the room. The energy emanating from it was nearly overwhelming now, and Eliot felt a strange pull, an invisible force that seemed to beckon him closer. This device, the Guardian explained, holds great power. It has the ability to shape the future, to destroy or to create. But its use is not without consequence. Eliot stepped closer to the device, his curiosity overpowering his caution. He could feel the intensity of the energy surrounding it, the power that seemed to surge through the room. But something else, something deeper, stirred in him. He felt as though the device was calling to him, like it knew he was the one meant to interact with it. Why us? Nathira asked, her voice still cautious. Why choose us? The Guardian's gaze shifted to her, and for the first time, its expression softened, just slightly. Because you are the ones who will choose, and your choices will determine the future of this place. Your people, it continued, turning back to Eliot, will be the ones to shape what happens next. You have power that even we could not foresee. The words were cryptic, and Eliot could feel the weight of them pressing down on him. He didn't understand what the Guardian was trying to say, but he knew one thing for sure. He was standing at a crossroads. Whatever decision he made now would have consequences, not just for him, but for Nathira and everyone else. I'm not sure I can make a decision like that, Eliot said, his voice shaky. I'm just a scout. I didn't come here to change the future. You already have, the Guardian replied, its tone both calming and unnerving. Your presence here, your journey, it has set events in motion. Now you must decide whether to continue on this path or turn back. But be warned, there is no going back once the choice is made. The room grew colder as the Guardian's words echoed in the silence. Eliot's mind was spinning. Could they just leave? Could they walk away from this and forget everything they had found here? It seemed impossible. He could feel the weight of the choice pressing on him, and in the back of his mind, a voice whispered that it wasn't just about him anymore. This was bigger than just one person or one mission. The fate of something much larger was at stake. Nathira looked at him, her silver eyes searching his face. Eliot, she said softly, we have to make this decision together. I can't do this alone. Her words grounded him. He realized then that this wasn't just about his decision. It was about both of them. They had come this far together, and whatever came next, they would face it side by side. Eliot turned back to the Guardian, his resolve strengthening. "What happens if we choose to use the device?" he asked. The Guardian's voice was soft but firm. "The device will unlock the power that lies dormant here. It will either save this place or destroy it. And once you make your choice, there is no turning back." Iliad's breath caught in his throat. There was so much at stake, more than he could have ever imagined. But now, with Nathira standing beside him, he knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. "I'm ready," Iliad said, his voice steady now. Nathira gave him a small nod, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "We're ready." The decision had been made. Iliad and Nathira stood side by side, facing the massive device. The air between them hummed with tension, the energy from the machine almost palpable. The Guardian had disappeared into the shadows, leaving them alone with the decision that lay ahead. The weight of it pressed on them, but for the first time in a long while, Iliad felt a sense of clarity. The signal that had brought them here, the mysterious technology, and the cryptic Guardian, all of it had led to this moment. Whatever choice they made would not only affect their own futures, but the future of this place, this planet, and possibly more. Nathira's gaze lingered on the device, her silver eyes reflecting the soft glow of the machine's energy. She looked at Iliad, and for a moment, her expression was unreadable. But then she spoke, her voice calm yet filled with determination. "What do you think, Iliad? Should we activate it?" Iliad took a deep breath, his mind racing with the possibilities. He knew that whatever came next, there was no going back. The device had been waiting for someone like him, someone from Earth. He had to trust his instincts, trust that the right choice would reveal itself as he stood there at the crossroads of destiny. "We don't have much time," Iliad said quietly, his eyes never leaving the device. "But if we don't try, we may never know what this is meant for." Nathira nodded, her wings fluttering lightly as she stepped closer to the machine. She didn't speak, but her presence beside him gave him the strength to move forward. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead. Iliad reached out, his hand hovering just above the surface of the device. The energy crackled in the air, and he could feel it pulling at him, urging him to make the choice. His heart beat faster, and for a moment, he hesitated. Was he ready for this? Could he bear the weight of the consequences? "Iliad," Nathira said softly, her voice reassuring. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready." He turned to her, meeting her gaze. Her eyes were filled with understanding, but there was something else too, trust. She trusted him, just as he trusted her. They were in this together, no matter what happened. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. With that, Iliad pressed his palm against the surface of the device. The moment his hand made contact, a surge of energy shot through him, filling his body with a strange warmth. The room seemed to shift around them, the walls flickering with light, and the ground beneath them hummed with power. Iliad's mind swirled with images, visions of ancient worlds, of powerful forces locked in a struggle for survival. He saw glimpses of the past, of civilizations that had risen and fallen. And then the vision shifted, showing him a future that was yet to come, a future that could be shaped by the choice he was making now. The energy surged again, and Iliad felt a jolt of realization. This device wasn't just a tool, it was a key to a future where anything was possible. But with that power came great responsibility. He could feel the weight of it now, like a heavy cloak settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone. It was about the universe. The light in the room grew brighter, and for a moment, everything went silent. Iliad's senses felt heightened, as if he could hear the heartbeat of the planet itself, the pulse of the stars in the sky above. And in that silence, he understood. This was the moment that would define everything. He closed his eyes, letting the power of the device wash over him. It wasn't just technology. It was something much more profound. Something that could either bring peace or destruction, depending on how it was used. And then he felt it, a wave of calm. A deep sense of peace washed over him. and he knew that the decision had been made. This was the right path. Nathira stepped closer, her wings now fully extended as the energy around them seemed to settle. She reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. The connection between them felt stronger than ever before. They had made the choice together, and now they had to see it through. The device hummed one last time, and then the energy began to fade, slowly. The room grew quieter, and the light dimmed. Eliot and Nathira stood in the center of it all, breathing deeply, their hearts still racing from the intensity of the moment. For a long while, neither of them spoke. They just stood there, letting the silence settle around them. But even in the quiet, they knew that something had changed. The future was no longer uncertain. They had chosen to move forward together into the unknown. "I think we've just changed everything," Nathira said, breaking the silence. Eliot turned to her, a smile tugging at his lips. "We did it. We made the choice, and now we face the future." Nathira nodded, her expression calm, but filled with something else. Hope. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Eliot took a deep breath, looking around the now quiet room. The device, once pulsing with energy, now seemed dormant. But Eliot knew that this was only the beginning. The choice they had made would echo throughout the galaxy, setting in motion events they couldn't even begin to understand. But they were no longer just explorers. They were part of something much bigger. Together, they stepped away from the device, hand in hand. The journey ahead was unknown, but Eliot felt ready to face whatever came next. He had Nathira by his side, and that made all the difference. As they left the chamber, the ship's engines hummed to life behind them. The stars stretched out before them, endless and full of possibility. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were no longer alone in it. They had each other, and together, they would change the course of the universe.